Manhattan, New York, the Metropolitan Museum Gala. Emma Parker fidgeted nervously with the sleek Valentino gown she'd borrowed, adjusting it for the third time in less than 5 minutes. The safety pin holding the back together felt like a ticking time bomb. As a freelance journalist who had charmingly bluffed her way into one of Manhattan's most prestigious charity events, Emma was painfully aware she didn't belong. Her goal was straightforward: secure an exclusive piece for Metropolitan Weekly by landing a high-profile interview with one of New York's elite. What she didn't anticipate was literally colliding with the most feared man in the country. Watch it. The deep, commanding voice sliced through the hum of laughter and clinking glasses as Emma stumbled, spilling a glass of Dom Perignon across a man's immaculately tailored white shirt. Her gaze lifted, and the blood drained from her face. Daniel Dan Sterling, the infamous heir to the Sterling finance dynasty, a man with a reputation as cold as the boardroom he ruled. At 34, he was Forbes's top bachelor, and arguably the most inaccessible man in Manhattan. "I am so sorry," Emma gasped, snatching cocktail napkins and patting at his chest in a frantic attempt to fix the damage. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to—" His slate-gray eyes studied her with chilling precision, scanning her from her too small designer gown to the clearly thrifted clutch in her hand. "You don't belong here," he said flatly, no louder than a whisper, but it cut like a blade. That's when Emma spotted her, gliding across the marble floor like a shark-scented blood, Victoria Whitman, the editor who'd fired Emma in a public, humiliating blaze months ago. Behind her came a trail of Manhattan's worst gossip writers, cameras already in hand. If Victoria recognized her here, the fallout wouldn't just ruin Emma's article, it would end her career permanently. Emma reached out and gripped Dan's arm, her voice barely audible. "Please, pretend you know me, just for 5 minutes." Dan's eyebrow rose slightly, the look in his eyes a mix of curiosity and disbelief. "Well, well, Emma Parker, what a surprise," came Victoria's voice, sweetly venomous. "Didn't know they were handing out invitations to your kind." Laughter rippled through the surrounding elites, and Emma's cheeks burned. It was now or never. "Actually," she said, forcing a smile and slipping her arm through Dan's, "I'm here with my fiancé." The room fell dead silent, the air heavy with shock. Victoria's surgically frozen face blanched. "Fiancé?" she repeated. "Yes," Emma replied, heart thudding wildly as Dan stiffened beside her. "Dan and I have been together for months, haven't we, sweetheart?" Every eye in the ballroom turned their way. Dozens of phones lifted in unison, capturing the moment. Emma could feel Dan's eyes drilling into her skull, but she couldn't back down. Victoria's gaze narrowed. "Is that true?" she asked Dan directly. Daniel Sterling, the man known for treating women like quarterly acquisitions and never being seen twice with the same date, finally looked at Emma. For one chilling heartbeat, Emma saw something flicker in Dan's steel-gray eyes. Was that amusement? Maybe even curiosity? "It's true," he announced, his voice calm but firm, reverberating through the hushed gala hall. And then, to the audible gasps of New York's upper crust, Dan pulled her in and brushed a kiss against her temple. "Emma is my fiancée." Pandemonium followed. Phones buzzed with calls. Flashes lit up like paparazzi flashbangs. And just like that, Emma Parker, broke, stressed, and with less than $50 to her name, was suddenly engaged to the most feared man in the city. Oh, sweet hell. Victoria Whitman looked like she'd swallowed a cactus. "Well," she managed with a tight, brittle smile, "congratulations." As the curious crowd swarmed in, hungry for juicy details, Dan's hand slid to the small of Emma's back. His touch was confident, commanding, and shockingly warm. Smile, darling, he whispered against her ear, sending a chill racing down her spine. You wanted a seat at the table. Welcome to the show. Emma summoned the brightest smile she could muster as Manhattan's power players surrounded them with champagne and thinly veiled suspicion. But inside, a single panicked thought circled like a hawk. What the hell have I done? As if he could hear her internal scream, Dan's grip on her waist firmed. She glanced up. His expression was unreadable, but his smirk held a sharp, wolfish edge. Don't worry, sweetheart, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, but with a quiet menace that made her gut twist. I take care of what's mine. The cameras adored it. The guests devoured it. And Emma realized she had just entered a deal with the devil in designer suits. Let the games begin, Manhattan. The next morning felt like waking from a surreal dream. Only the exploding headlines across every gossip site confirmed the nightmare was very, very real. Sterling's secret fiancé. Who is Emma Parker? Emma stared at her laptop screen from the cramped corner of her Brooklyn studio, a cold mug of coffee forgotten in her hands. Everywhere she looked, there was the same photo. Dan's arm around her. The two of them looking like they belonged in a Vogue spread instead of a disaster in progress. Her phone had started ringing before sunrise. Journalists, influencers, estranged relatives. She'd thrown it into airplane mode an hour ago, but it kept vibrating against her nightstand like a ticking bomb. A sharp knock at the door made her nearly drop her cup. Emma Parker? The voice was cool, clipped, and definitely high-end. We're here on behalf of Mr. Sterling. Peeking through the peephole, Emma saw two suited men who looked like they belonged in a spy film, and a woman holding an iPad like it was a scepter. Security. Her stomach dropped. Cracking open the door, she found herself eye to eye with a woman in tailored gray and red lipstick perfection. Patricia Hayes, the woman introduced herself briskly. Mr. Sterling's executive assistant. He'd like to see you immediately. Her tone was polite but firm enough to broker peace talks. There's a car waiting downstairs. I can just take the subway. I'm afraid not. Patricia gestured toward the window. Emma pulled back the blinds and gasped. At least 15 paparazzi were camped outside, lenses ready, flashing like snipers in the daylight. Oh, crap. Indeed, shall we? 30 minutes later, Emma stood in the sleek elevator of Sterling Tower, rising toward the 52nd floor with clammy palms and a nervous tug at the only blazer she owned that didn't have a coffee stain. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and she stepped into a world of glass, chrome, and cold precision. Dan's office looked like it belonged in a billionaire's fantasy, floor-to-ceiling windows with an empire view of Manhattan, enough space to land a helicopter, and furniture that screamed custom Italian leather. He stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders about mergers and deadlines. Even without seeing his face, his presence was palpable, commanding, dangerous. I don't care if the Tokyo deal crashes, he was saying. We pivot. We find another path. We've got 18 hours. He ended the call and finally turned. In the morning light, Emma could see it. Why women fell all over themselves for him. Sharp cheekbones, hair perfectly tousled, eyes like ice storms, and a presence that could freeze an army in place. Ms. Parker, he greeted, voice frostier than January. Please sit. Emma eased into the leather chair across from him, feeling like she'd wandered into a courtroom instead of an office. Let's address the obvious, Dan said, folding himself into his seat with the quiet power of a man used to control. You've created quite the spectacle. I know, Emma blurted out. I screwed up. I shouldn't have. He held up a hand and a faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. On the contrary, Miss Parker, You may have just solved an incredibly expensive problem for me. Emma blinked. Wait, what? Dan flipped open a folder and slid it toward her. Inside were contracts, spreadsheets, and a strange-looking family diagram. My grandfather's will has one condition. I must be married before my 35th birthday to claim full control of Sterling Holdings. He glanced at the wall clock. That gives me exactly 8 months. His tone was casual, businesslike, like they were discussing inventory, not marriage. The board expects me to choose a bride, Dan said flatly, from a list of candidates they've already approved. Emma's mouth fell open. You can't be serious. I never joke when it comes to business, Miss Parker. He turned away, moving to the window with hands clasped behind his back like a general surveying a battlefield. To me, marriage is strategic. Nothing more. Emma sat frozen, trying to process what she was hearing. You're drowning in debt, Dan continued, without looking at her. Our background check turned up maxed-out cards and 3 months of unpaid rent. I need a wife. Temporarily. You need financial security. This isn't crazy. It's efficient. You want me to marry you? For money? Emma's voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. I'm offering a business deal. He returned to his desk and placed a folder in front of her. A 1-year contract. You play the supportive, loving wife in public, attend events, help solidify my claim to the company. In exchange, you'll receive $5 million in startup funding for your own media brand. The number hit her like a slap. $5 million. Her mind reeled. But we barely know each other, she said softly. Exactly. No emotional baggage, no illusions, just a clean, professional arrangement that benefits us both. His expression was pure steel. But I won't lie to you, being Mrs. Sterling won't be easy. My name brings expectations, scrutiny, and enemies who'd love nothing more than to see us implode. Emma stared at the paperwork, hands trembling. The idea was unthinkable, absurd. But $5 million? That could change everything. I need time, she whispered. You have until tonight, Dan said, glancing at his watch. There's a charity auction at the plaza. Every power player and media outlet on the East Coast will be there. If you don't show up as my fiancé, I'll let everyone believe last night was just champagne and confusion. You'll be forgotten by morning. His smile was pleasant, but the warning beneath it was unmistakable. And if I agree? Dan's expression softened, barely. Then prepare yourself, Miss Parker. Being engaged to me will be the most challenging job you've ever had. As she stepped out of Sterling Tower, Emma's thoughts spiraled in every direction. Her heart pounded with uncertainty, her brain torn between survival and sanity. This wasn't just a choice. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with wind whipping at her back. Jump, and everything could change. Don't, and she might regret it forever. 52 stories above, Daniel watched from his office window as she disappeared into the sea of Midtown pedestrians. A flicker of something, anticipation, maybe, passed through his eyes. The game was on. For the first time in years, he didn't know the outcome. The Plaza Hotel, Manhattan. Emma barely recognized the woman staring back at her in the mirror. The midnight blue gown hugged her like a secret. The fabric shimmered in the soft light, heavy and luxurious, molded to her frame like it had been tailored by the gods. Her unruly waves were transformed into a flawless updo, her face sculpted with professional precision. Not bad, Parker, she murmured to her reflection, attempting to calm the chaos inside her chest. A quiet knock interrupted her inner pep talk. When she opened the door, Dan stood there like a page from a fashion editorial. Sleek black tuxedo, sharp features, and a confidence that made the hallway shrink around him. For a moment, they both just stared. "You look—" He paused, eyes flickering with something unreadable. "Suitable?" Emma nearly laughed. Leave it to Daniel Sterling to make a compliment sound like a performance review. "Thanks," she said dryly. "You clean up okay, too." She grabbed her clutch, another detail arranged by Patricia, his terrifyingly efficient assistant, and hesitated only briefly before taking his offered arm. When she touched him, her heart stuttered. "Before we head down," Dan said, his voice shifting into full business mode, "we need to establish some ground rules." "Rules?" "This crowd isn't easily fooled. These people can sniff out a fake like wolves scenting blood. Some of them built fortunes off reading the slightest cracks in a deal or a relationship." He adjusted his cufflinks without breaking stride. "If we're going to sell this lie, we have to sell it completely." Emma's confidence faltered. "What if I mess up?" "You won't," he said with calm assurance. "Just stick close. Follow my lead. And above all," he met her eyes, "act like you're crazy about me." Her mouth went dry. Madly in love? With Daniel Sterling? Right. What could possibly go wrong? The way he said madly in love, as if he were delivering quarterly earnings? Should have made her laugh. Instead, it sparked a flutter in her stomach that she couldn't quite name. "Any other tips from the fake romance survival guide?" she asked, trying to mask the nerves. Dan stepped closer, his presence commanding. The scent of his cologne, woodsy, expensive, dangerously distracting, wrapped around her like a whisper. She wanted to lean in, which made no sense at all. "When I touch you, don't stiffen. When I talk to you, make it look like I'm the only person in the room worth listening to." Emma raised a brow. "And if someone asks how we fell in love, keep it vague, make it dreamy. Let them fill in the blanks," he replied with a smile so sharp it could cut glass. "They want to believe the Ice King melted. Give them a show." The ballroom at the plaza was a shimmering fantasy. Towering chandeliers, walls lined with orchids, and enough diamonds in the room to buy an island or three. Emma had attended these kinds of events before, but always as the invisible girl slipping in through the back door. Never as a guest, and certainly never as the center of attention. Tonight, though, every head turned when she walked in on Dan Sterling's arm. Conversations hushed. Champagne glasses froze midair. She could feel it, eyes scanning her every move. Judging the dress, the way she walked, the way Dan's hand rested firmly at her lower back, claiming her with a single touch. "Breathe," Dan murmured in her ear. His breath warmed her skin. "You're doing great. I feel like I'm on display in a glass cage. Welcome to my life." There was a faint softness in his voice. "It gets easier." "Daniel, there you are." A woman in flawless Chanel came sweeping toward them like royalty, elegant, polished, and intimidating. "And this must be the famous Emma," she said, her tone sugary and sharp all at once. Dan turned smoothly. "Emma, this is Margaret Wellington. She practically runs Manhattan's charity scene." Emma smiled politely. "It's lovely to meet you." Margaret's jewels glittered as brightly as her eyes. "It's delightful to finally meet the woman who captured our Daniel's heart. So, how did you two meet?" Emma's mind blanked, panic prickling her spine. But before she could say a word, Dan pulled her closer and took over. "She was interviewing me," he said, his voice surprisingly warm. "It was for an article. She asked me something no one ever had before." Margaret's eyes gleamed with curiosity. "Oh? And what was that?" Dan looked at Emma then, really looked at her. His performance melted into something that felt startlingly real. "She asked me what made me happy." The words hung between them like a held breath. Emma felt something stir in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. How romantic, Margaret swooned. And what did you tell her? Dan's gaze never left Emma. I told her I didn't know. But lately, I've been finding out. Emma's breath caught. It was an act. They both knew that. But the way he said it, with softness, sincerity, made something inside her falter. For a second, she forgot they were pretending. Well, Margaret beamed, you two are simply enchanting. I must introduce you to the Vanderbilts. They've been dying to meet Emma. The next 2 hours were a blur. Handshakes, double air kisses, endless small talk. Emma found herself swept along by the current of it, but surprisingly, she kept up. Dan's touch at her back, his subtle cues during conversations, the way he pulled her into discussions about finance and politics like her opinion held weight. It all grounded her. You're a natural, Dan murmured during a quiet moment as they waited for the auction to begin. I'm a journalist, she said, surprised by her own ease. It's my job to read people, to adapt. Is that what you're doing with me? He asked, tilting his head. Maybe. Do you think I'm an open book, Miss Parker? She grinned. Hardly, but I might be the first person to try and read you. Dan's smile was brief but genuine. You just might. Before Emma could say more, the lights dimmed and the auctioneer took the stage. They took seats at a table near the front, surrounded by New York's elite. Dan placed casual, sky-high bids like he was buying socks. Exclusive Hamptons vacations, 5-star chef dinners, rare wine collections. Emma leaned closer. Do you always throw money around like this? It's for charity, Dan replied. And most of the bidders are business partners. Maintaining relationships is just as valuable as philanthropy. So everything is strategy for you? He turned to her, something flickering in his eyes. Not everything. Before she could ask what that meant, the auctioneer's booming voice rang out. Our next item, he announced, is something truly special, an exclusive Mediterranean yacht charter, courtesy of Sterling Holdings. Emma blinked. Dan didn't even flinch. Of course he owned a yacht. Of course he did. Emma noticed the slight clench in Dan's jaw, a tiny movement, but one that spoke volumes. This twist hadn't been part of the original plan. The bidding will start at $100,000, the auctioneer announced. Hands shot up around the ballroom like lightning strikes. Emma watched, spellbound, as the numbers surged. $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. Then a voice rang out from the back. $500,000. Emma turned sharply to see who it was and froze. Seated casually at a corner table, Victoria Whitman wore a smug, predatory smile. $600,000, Dan declared coldly, slicing through the murmurs like a blade. Victoria's smirk only grew. $700,000. Emma could practically feel the fury radiating off Dan. It rolled off him like heat from open flames. This wasn't philanthropy anymore. This was personal. 1 million, Dan said, his voice calm, lethal. A collective gasp spread through the room. Victoria's face lost some color, but her expression didn't falter. $1.2 million, she countered. Dan started to raise his hand again, but Emma reached out and grabbed his wrist. The jolt of contact sent a shiver through her, but she ignored it. Don't, she whispered. She's provoking you. This isn't about the yacht anymore. It's about humiliating me. Dan's gaze locked on hers. But you've already made your point. Let her win the battle. It won't win her the war. He studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he dropped his hand. Sold to Ms. Whitman for $1.2. No, $2 million, the auctioneer confirmed. A wave of murmurs passed through the room. Emma waited, bracing herself for the sting of Dan's anger. But instead, he leaned in close, his lips brushing her ear. "Not bad, Miss Parker." "Smart business sometimes means walking away," she murmured, her skin alive where his breath had touched it. "You really think Victoria isn't worth the fight?" Emma turned to face him, startled by how close he was. "She just spent $1.2 million to get a reaction out of you. That means you've already won." Dan stared at her, then threw back his head and laughed, a deep, genuine sound that lit up his whole face. Heads turned to look. Apparently, seeing Daniel Sterling laugh was a rare event. "You know something, Emma Parker?" he said, his eyes gleaming with what looked dangerously like admiration. "I think I'm actually going to enjoy being married to you." As bidding resumed around them, Emma tried to ignore the sudden quickening of her heartbeat. This was just business, she reminded herself. All pretend. But Dan's eyes told a different story, one that felt dangerously close to being real, and with every passing second, the line between the game and reality blurred. Sterling Penthouse, Upper East Side, the next morning. Emma woke in a bed that probably cost more than her entire yearly income. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, the mattress soft as clouds, and outside the window, Central Park stretched like a painting. For a brief moment, she let herself forget. Then the memories came flooding back. She was in Daniel Sterling's penthouse, his guest room, specifically. After the auction, paparazzi had tailed them to multiple locations, and Dan had decided she needed to stay somewhere secure. Patricia had packed up her entire apartment, all 2 suitcases of it, and relocated her by the time dinner was over. "It's only temporary," Dan had said, as he personally hauled her things into the elevator, just until the media storm dies down. That was 3 days ago. The storm hadn't died. It had intensified. Emma wandered to the giant windows in her silk pajamas, another item Patricia had supplied, and looked down. Sure enough, a battalion of photographers lined the sidewalk below, cameras aimed like weapons. "They've been camped out since 5 a.m., came Dan's voice behind her. She spun around. He leaned casually in the doorway, already suited up. Bespoke jacket, crisp shirt, a tie that probably cost more than her rent. His damp hair and expensive cologne made her stomach flip. "Do you ever sleep?" she asked, suddenly all too aware of her skimpy silk shorts and camisole. "Early bird gets the worm," he said, with a glance that briefly flicked down her legs before returning to her face. "Besides, I've got a board breakfast. They want to meet my fiancé." Emma's stomach twisted. "Today?" "Patricia stocked your closet with something appropriate," he said, voice softer now. "It's just breakfast. Call it a rehearsal for the harder parts." "What harder parts?" Dan walked over to the window, standing close enough for her to feel his body heat. "My family," he said darkly. Emma's pulse skipped. "Your family?" "My mother called last night. She's throwing us an engagement party. This weekend, 200 guests, full media coverage, every Sterling in the country." His jaw clenched again. "Including my charming stepbrother, Marcus." Emma sank into a chair, heart thudding. "This is getting very real, very fast." Dan's expression darkened. "And it's about to get worse. Marcus has spent years trying to chip away at my credibility with the board," Dan said, voice low but steady. "Now that we're engaged, he sees the perfect chance to claim I'm emotionally unstable and unfit to lead." He turned toward Emma, eyes serious. "Which means we can't just look convincing. We have to be flawless. No doubts, no hesitation. If we slip, even for a second, he'll use it to destroy everything." The magnitude of it all hit Emma like a weight pressing on her chest. Doubt crept in. Maybe this was a bad idea. Maybe we should walk away. No. Dan's tone was firm, unwavering. We've come too far to quit now. He stepped closer, kneeling until they were eye to eye. At this distance, she noticed faint hints of blue in his gray irises, and how his lashes were unfairly long. Emma, you need to hear this. This isn't just about me or money anymore. If Marcus manages to ruin me, the entire company collapses. 20,000 people could lose their livelihoods. Retirement funds wiped out. Entire towns built around our factories will suffer. His words struck a chord. For the first time, Emma saw the man behind the executive mask. A man who cared deeply, not just calculated. All right, she whispered. What's our next move? Dan exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders. We give them a love story so convincing, they'll never question us again. 2 hours later, Emma was seated across from a dozen stern-faced individuals in a sleek, intimidating dining room on the top floor of Sterling Holdings. The board of directors looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury catalog. Tailored suits, steely eyes, and smiles that didn't quite touch their eyes. Dan's mother, Catherine Sterling, made her entrance with effortless grace, the kind of elegance born from old wealth. Her silver hair was impeccably styled, her skin flawless, and her diamonds sparkled with silent authority. Emma, darling, Catherine cooed as she glided over. Mrs. Sterling, Emma greeted, extending a hand. It's an honor to meet you. Catherine bypassed the handshake, offering an air kiss that smelled of Chanel No. 5 and disapproval. Please call me Catherine. We're family now, after all. She said family, as if it were a life sentence. A smooth voice cut in from behind. Catherine, don't keep the bride-to-be all to yourself. Emma turned to see a man who resembled Dan, only slightly softer, more charming, but equally intense. Marcus Sterling, he said with a charismatic smile, extending his hand. The less celebrated stepbrother. I've heard quite a bit about you, Emma. All good, I hope, she replied, shaking his hand while trying not to recoil at the firmness of his grip. Oh, absolutely, he said smoothly. Though I am curious how you and Dan met. He's been a bit vague. Emma felt Dan's hand rest gently on her lower back, grounding her. I told you, Marcus. Emma was writing a piece on me. Yes, but which piece? Marcus pressed, his smile unwavering. I had my team search her recent work, and strangely, there's nothing about Sterling Holdings or Dan. The air thickened. Every eye turned to Emma, waiting. It was a profile on New York's most eligible bachelors, she said without flinching. But once we began seeing each other, I pulled the article. Ethical boundaries. How noble, Marcus replied, though his eyes still probed. And which publication was it for? Metropolitan Weekly, she answered smoothly. But again, it never ran due to our relationship. She felt Dan's hand press slightly at her back, hopefully a sign of approval, not anxiety. Well, Catherine chimed in, flashing a diamond-hard smile, we're delighted Dan has found someone at last. Tell me, Emma, how do you feel about children? Emma nearly choked on her mimosa. Children? Of course. We're all hoping for grandbabies eventually. The Sterling name must continue. Mother? Dan warned. Oh, stop. Catherine waved him off. It's a reasonable question. Her gaze returned to Emma with surgical precision. You do want children, don't you, dear? Emma felt like she was under a spotlight, being interrogated by a queen in pearls. Well, Dan and I haven't really. We'd like to enjoy married life first, Dan cut in, his arm wrapping protectively around Emma's waist. The gesture looked possessive and perfectly timed. There's plenty of time to think about starting a family, Daniel's mother said breezily. Catherine quickly nodded in agreement, but Emma didn't miss the sharp glance she shot Marcus. Still, at your age, Daniel, It's not something you want to postpone too long. The rest of breakfast followed the same uncomfortable rhythm. Questions dressed as polite small talk, comments designed to rattle her, and a layer of tension thick enough to cut. Emma felt like she was navigating a minefield in stilettos. By the time she and Daniel finally escaped, her head was pounding and her jaw ached from the forced smile she'd worn all morning. "Well, that was pleasant," Daniel said, as the elevator doors closed behind them. Emma looked at him, stunned. "Your stepbrother was interrogating me like I was on trial, and your mom was asking about babies before I even finished my coffee." Daniel gave her a dry smile. "Welcome to the Sterling family. Marcus has been trying to dig up dirt on me since we were kids, and I ended up with more from Grandpa's will. As for my mother, she means well, but subtlety's never really been her thing." "This is madness," Emma muttered, leaning against the elevator wall. "How are we supposed to pull this off for a whole year?" "The same way we got through breakfast," he said, stepping closer. "By being a team." Something about the way he said it made her look up. He was suddenly much closer, one arm resting against the wall above her. The elevator now felt too small and too warm. "Emma," he said, voice low, "I know this isn't what you imagined. It's harder than either of us thought. Dan, let me finish." He reached up and cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin so gently it stole her breath. "You were amazing in there. You kept your cool, didn't flinch, and handled every jab with grace. I couldn't have asked for a better partner." The word partner lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Emma could feel his hand on her face, feel the heat in his gaze. "This is just the start," she whispered. "I know." His thumb moved slowly across her lower lip, and her heart raced. "But if we're really doing this," she said, "we need to go all in. No pretending halfway. No hesitation." "What are you saying?" His eyes searched hers, and for a heartbeat, she thought he was going to kiss her. The tension crackled between them, and then the elevator dinged. The moment shattered. Daniel stepped back, his expression shifting back to business. "I'm saying we need to rehearse. If we're going to convince everyone we're madly in love, we need to be comfortable with each other, really comfortable." Emma's cheeks flushed. "Comfortable? Physically?" "Exactly. Holding hands, touching naturally, the kind of closeness real couples don't even think about." Though his voice was steady, Emma noticed a faint blush creeping up his neck. "We can't afford to look awkward." "Right. Practice," she said, straightening her back and trying to steady herself. "Makes sense." "There's something else," Dan added as the elevator doors slid open. "The engagement party. My mom wants to announce the wedding date." Emma's stomach sank. "What wedding date?" "We haven't picked one. We have now, June 15th, 3 months from today." "3 months?" she squeaked. "That's insanely fast." "It's what she expects. Quick engagement, quick ceremony, and then grandchildren." Dan's smile was tight. "Don't worry, we'll find a way to stall after the party. Family emergency, scheduling conflict, something." Emma nodded numbly. 3 months. That was all they had to stage the wedding of the year, fool New York's elite, and somehow resist whatever this magnetic pull between them was. "Oh, and Emma," Dan said as they reached his penthouse door, "you should probably call your family. Let them know they'll be invited to the Sterling wedding. My mother will want to meet them beforehand." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "My family? Your parents, siblings, whoever you'd like to include in the wedding party," he said casually, unlocking the door. "Don't worry about cost. We'll fly them first class, put them up at the plaza. Nothing but the best for my future in-laws." Emma stood frozen in place. Her family? How could she explain that her father vanished when she was 16, lost to alcohol? Her mother had passed away from cancer 3 years ago, and there was no one left who could even pretend she belonged in Daniel Sterling's world. Emma? Dan turned around, concern knitting his brows. Yeah, she replied, forcing a smile. Just processing. I know it's a lot, he said, voice softer now. But we'll get through this. Together. And as they walked into the penthouse, Emma tried not to dwell on how her heart fluttered at that one word. Together. Emma had more pressing issues than the inconvenient feelings growing toward her so-called fiancé. She was trying to create an entire fictional family lineage that would pass under the Sterling family's scrutinizing eye, survive an engagement party likely to dominate every major tabloid in the country, and somehow keep her real past sealed, despite the fact that these people had the resources to dig up her elementary school lunch menu if they wanted. On top of that, she had to keep pretending she was hopelessly in love with a man who was starting to make her forget the entire thing was an act. The stakes were rising fast, and if she wasn't careful, her heart would be the first to fall. It was 2 a.m., and Emma stood in Dan's home office, staring at the whiteboard she'd filled with half-baked attempts to fabricate a believable backstory. Diagrams, timelines, and made-up profiles cluttered the board, none of them good enough to fool the Sterling's elite-level scrutiny. Option 1, dead parents in a tragic crash, she mumbled, wiping it clean for the 4th time. Too dramatic, she scribbled again. Option 2, missionaries abroad, too suspicious. Another pause. Option 3, raised by a now-deceased grandma, feels like a Dickens novel. You know talking to yourself is the first sign of a breakdown, came Dan's voice from the doorway. Emma spun around, startled. He stood there in just pajama, pants, hair tousled, looking like he'd just rolled out of bed. She tried very hard not to stare at the way the hallway light skimmed across his chest. Did I wake you? She asked, suddenly self-conscious in his Columbia University shirt that hung over her shorts. Living together for just 3 days, they'd somehow slipped into a rhythm that felt alarmingly natural. Wasn't sleeping anyway, he said, stepping closer to glance at the whiteboard. He was near enough for her to catch the scent of his soap, and something distinctly him. Midnight family construction. Impressive. More like desperate, Emma sighed, collapsing into the leather chair. Dan, I can't pull this off. I can't fabricate a family and expect to outwit people who probably use CIA-level background checks. Dan looked at her for a moment, his expression shifting. Where's your real family, Emma? The question landed with the weight of a hammer. She had dreaded this moment since their elevator chat, knowing the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. My mom passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. The words were flat, drained of emotion, practiced. It was the only way she could say them without unraveling. My dad left when I was 16. I haven't seen him since. Dan's expression grew still. I'm sorry. You don't have to be. Just bad luck in the parent department, she said with a faint smile. No siblings. No extended family that bothers with me. It's been just me for a while now. A heavy silence settled between them until Dan turned and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed her one before sitting across from her. So, we have a situation. We have multiple? She muttered, taking a sip. The burn helped. My family expects to meet yours. My mom will want to arrange joint events, and Marcus is definitely going to dig into anyone you claim to be related to. Then we don't give him fakes to investigate, Dan said, his tone shifting into that calculated confidence she knew from his business calls. We give him real people. Emma frowned. Real people? My family, Dan said simply. He leaned forward. Say your parents did die in that car crash. What if you were raised by your mom's best friend, a woman who took you in and became family? I can't ask strangers to play relatives, Emma protested. Not strangers, he said with a grin. My Aunt Sarah and Uncle Robert. They live in Boston. She's my mom's younger sister. They've always stayed far away from Sterling family drama, and they owe me one, from when I helped them save their restaurant years ago. Emma stared at him in disbelief. You want your own family to pretend they're mine? Why not? Sarah isn't anything like my mother. She's warm, grounded, could care less about wealth. She married a high school English teacher. She's exactly the kind of woman who'd take in a lost teen and love her like her own. But your mother would recognize her sister? Won't that blow everything up? Not a chance, Dan said, eyes gleaming. They haven't spoken in 12 years. Big fallout over Mom's third marriage. They avoid each other like the plague. Emma blinked. So they'd never cross paths? Not unless we plan it, which we won't, he said, already picking up his phone. Sarah has 2 kids. Jake's a lawyer, Lily's a teacher. They're solid people. They'll help. They don't even know me. They will, and once they do, they'll love you. His voice was so sure, so full of quiet belief that it made something twist in Emma's chest. Dan, you can't just drag your family into this kind of lie. He gave her a look. Watch me. Then he dialed. Hey, Sarah. Yeah, sorry for calling late. I need a favor. A big one. Emma listened, captivated, as his voice softened in a way she hadn't heard before. This was a side of Dan she hadn't seen before. Less guarded, more human. From the phone came the sound of a woman's laughter, followed by a flurry of curious questions. Dan handed her the phone. She wants to talk to you. Emma took it with shaky fingers. Hi, Emma, darling. The voice had a warm tone and the faintest Boston accent. Danny's filled me in on everything. What a disaster those Sterling leeches have caused. Mrs. Patterson, I can't possibly... You're not asking, honey. I'm offering. There was no hesitation in her voice. My sister Catherine's been a stuck-up nightmare ever since she married into that snobby family. Honestly, anything that'll annoy her is a win in my book. Her laugh was bright, infectious. Besides, Danny says you make him happy, and that's been rare for him lately. Emma glanced at Dan, who was pretending to focus on his drink but was clearly hanging on every word. Sweetheart, I don't care if this thing is real, fake, or something in between. That boy's been coiled up like a spring since he took over the company. If you're the reason he laughed just now, I'm all in. No debates. Sarah continued, Robert and I will be there for the engagement party. We'll bring the old photo albums, some juicy childhood stories, and just enough sincere affection to convince anyone. Jake and Lily are coming too. They've missed Danny. Emma blinked back sudden tears. Why would you do all this? For someone you don't even know? You're not a stranger anymore, Sarah said gently, her tone firm with conviction. You're family, and we protect our own. Always. When the call ended, Emma sat silently, overwhelmed. Dan wordlessly topped off her glass. That was Sarah, he said, voice soft. She's never met a stray she wouldn't try to rescue. Dan, I don't even know how to begin thanking you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't met Jake and Lily. He smirked. Jake's going to give you the overprotective big brother routine. Lily will try to plan your entire wedding, including the napkin colors. They're really going along with this, like I'm family. They're not pretending, Dan said, meeting her eyes. Sarah doesn't do pretend. Once she decides you're hers, that's it. Even if this marriage ends, you'll still get holiday invites and birthday cards. The idea should have comforted her. Instead, it made her chest tighten in a way she didn't quite understand. What happens when they find out it was all a lie? When it ends and they realize we weren't real? Dan hesitated, then admitted, I don't know. I've never lied to Sarah before. She's intuitive, sees through people like glass. Then maybe we should tell her. No. His voice was firm. The fewer who know, the better. Marcus has eyes everywhere. Even Sarah could slip up by accident. Emma nodded slowly, but unease gnawed at her. Lying to business partners was one thing. But this was dragging good people into something fake. It didn't sit right. There's something else, Dan added, pulling her out of her thoughts. My mom called while you were inventing a fake family. She wants us at the Hamptons estate this weekend. Bonding time before the party. Emma's stomach twisted. This weekend? That's in 2 days. I know. She's invited Marcus, Amanda, and a few other family friends. It'll be intense. Define intense. Think. Locked in a stunning mansion for 3 days with people smiling at you while planning your downfall. Oh, and my mom expects us to share a room. Emma nearly spit out her drink. A room? Together? We're engaged. It'd look odd if we requested separate rooms. Dan's cheeks flushed slightly, though his voice remained composed. Don't worry, I'll take the couch or something. We just need to keep up appearances. Right. Appearances. She tried not to think about what it would be like sharing space with Dan for a whole weekend. What else should I brace for? Tennis matches where every word is a veiled jab, dinner tables full of subtle landmines, and my mom's favorite pastime, putting guests in emotionally volatile situations just to see who cracks. Charming, Emma muttered. Oh, it gets better. Marcus will definitely try to get you alone. He's skilled at twisting words and getting under people's skin. Emma straightened. Let him. I've been grilled by arms dealers and cartel negotiators. I can handle one smug stepbrother. Dan grinned, proud, but something softer too. That's my girl. The casual affection sent warmth through her chest. She reminded herself it was all pretend, just part of the show. But the way Dan looked at her made it hard to tell where the act ended, and something real began. We should rehearse, she said, trying to regain focus. Rehearse what? Being a couple. If we're sharing a room and spending the weekend with your family, we need to make it look natural, comfortable. Emma got to her feet and began pacing the room, a nervous habit she couldn't suppress. Hand-holding casual touches, those little gestures real couples shared so naturally, they needed to look like that. Dan observed her silently, his face unreadable. You're right, he finally said. We should practice. Something in his tone made her freeze. He stood as well and walked toward her, every movement fluid and intentional. Her breath hitched as he stopped just inches away. Emma, he said quietly, if we're going to pull this off, you have to trust me. Can you do that? She gave a silent nod, her voice lost somewhere in her throat. Good. He reached up and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, so gently it sent a shiver down her spine. When we're around people, I'll touch you. Not in any way inappropriate, but like a man touches the woman he loves. Emma's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. Okay. I'll look at you like you're the only one in the room. Because to make this convincing, that's who you'll have to be. His thumb traced the curve of her cheek, and she almost leaned into the contact. Can you handle that? I'm stronger than I look, she whispered. A soft smile spread across Dan's face, warm and unexpectedly tender. I know you are, he said. That's one of the reasons He stopped himself, backing away quickly. We should get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Emma nodded, but a strange heaviness settled in her chest. It felt like he'd been on the verge of saying something that would have changed everything. As he reached the door, she called after him, Dan? Yeah? Your Aunt Sarah? She seems like a really special person. His face lit up with a genuine, open smile. She is. You're going to love her. And she's definitely going to love you. Emma watched him disappear down the hallway, trying not to dwell on the whisper in the back of her mind. Maybe that's the danger. Maybe being welcomed by his family. Being accepted. Maybe that would make it impossible to walk away once the arrangement ended. Some lines, once crossed, don't erase. The next morning, the smell of bacon and fresh coffee coaxed her out of bed. She found Dan already dressed, managing a full breakfast while scanning his tablet. "You can cook?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "Sarah made sure I could by the time I turned 12. Said no nephew of hers would grow up useless in a kitchen." He gave her a quick grin. "Scrambled eggs, bacon, fruit. Oh, and Patricia's dropping off some Hampton-appropriate outfits later." Emma poured herself coffee from a machine that probably cost more than her old car. Hampton-appropriate? Think polished prep, designer sundresses during the day, cocktail dresses for the evening, and something sporty for tennis. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowning slightly. "Speaking of which, do you play tennis? Does hitting a ball against the high school gym wall count? We'll mark you as a beginner. Marcus hates losing more than anything, so losing to a beginner will drive him nuts." Emma was starting to understand. Sterling family events were more like strategy games. Every word, every gesture calculated for effect. "Dan," she said carefully, "what happens if I screw this up? If I say the wrong thing or miss some hidden cue?" He set down his tablet and gave her his full attention. Walking around the island, he placed his hands gently on her shoulders. "You won't screw up. But if Emma, you managed to bluff your way into a black tie gala, convince Manhattan socialites you belonged, and field my mother's interrogation without blinking. You're more than capable." His unwavering confidence was equal parts comforting and overwhelming. "And if someone gives you a hard time," he added, with a mischievous smile, "remember, you're holding the most dangerous secret of all." She blinked. What secret? Dan's eyes sparkled. That Daniel Sterling is actually capable of falling in love. Her breath caught. For a moment, the kitchen was silent, but for the soft hum of traffic far below. Dan looked at her like she was something fragile and valuable. And Emma had to remind herself this was just for show, just part of the plan. But then he leaned down and placed a feather-light kiss on her forehead, and nothing about it felt rehearsed. "Eat up," he said quietly. "We've got a whole weekend to get through." As he gathered his things and headed out, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that surviving the weekend was the easy part. Because somewhere between pretending and practicing, she was starting to forget why falling for Daniel Sterling was supposed to be such a terrible idea. And by the look in his eyes, he was forgetting too. The weekend getaway to the Hamptons promised danger, but not in the way Emma had expected. It had little to do with Marcus Sterling's manipulations and everything to do with the risk of losing herself in something that could never last. She just prayed she'd be strong enough to walk away from the best thing that had ever happened to her when all was said and done. Even if it had begun as the most convincing lie she'd ever lived. The Sterling family's estate in the Hamptons looked like it had been lifted straight from the pages of The Great Gatsby, sweeping green lawns that melted into a secluded beachfront, a mansion large enough to house an army, and an air of extravagance that even royalty might envy. Emma stared out of Dan's Tesla window as they wound around the circular drive, doing her best not to look completely starstruck. "Just breathe," Dan murmured, his fingers intertwining with hers on her lap. "You belong here. You're my fiancé, and I chose you. That's all that matters." Emma squeezed his hand, silently thankful for the reassurance. Over the past several days, they'd rehearsed how to look effortlessly close, casual touches, quick kisses, the way his hand would linger at the small of her back as they walked together. But now that they were here, about to spend an entire weekend surrounded by his family, the stakes felt 10 times heavier. "There's Marcus," Dan said under his breath as the car stopped. Emma spotted a man who looked like a glossier, more polished version of Dan standing with a blonde woman whose beauty seemed unreal, like she'd stepped off a designer runway. They both smiled, but Marcus's grin had a sharpness that made her uneasy. "And that's Amanda," Dan added. "Miss Connecticut once upon a time. Now she's Marcus's wife, an expert in charm and ruthless social games." "Fantastic. Anything else she should brace for?" Dan turned to her, his gray eyes steady and serious. "Whatever happens in there, whatever they say or do to get under your skin, just remember this. It's you and me. We're a team. Always." Something about the conviction in his voice made her heart skip a beat. "Always," he repeated. Then he leaned in and kissed her, a soft, deliberate brush of lips. Probably for show, just in case someone was watching from the windows. But when his hand cupped her face and the kiss lingered just a second longer than expected, Emma forgot all about the audience. When they pulled apart, both of them were slightly breathless. "For luck," he said, voice low, though his eyes hinted at something deeper than luck. "Right," Emma replied, trying to ignore the way her heart was pounding. At the front door, Catherine Sterling greeted them like a hostess claiming her territory. She pulled Emma into a too-firm hug and purred, "Emma, darling, you're glowing." "Isn't she glowing, Marcus?" Marcus stepped forward with a politician's charm, took Emma's hand, and held it just a bit too long. "Radiant," he said, "even lovelier than your photo suggested." "Thank you," Emma murmured, instinctively stepping closer to Dan. "And this is Amanda," Marcus said, motioning to the picture-perfect blonde beside him. Amanda's smile was flawless, but icy. "Emma, I've been dying to meet the woman who finally tamed our Daniel," she said sweetly. "You must tell me your secret." "No secret," Emma replied with a light laugh. "Guess I just got lucky." "Oh, I doubt luck had anything to do with it," Amanda said, her tone sugary but edged. "A woman doesn't land Daniel Sterling without a very deliberate plan." The comment stung, wrapped in silk but sharp as glass. Before Emma could respond, Dan's arm slipped tighter around her. "The only plan she had was to interview me," he said smoothly. "Everything else was just chemistry." The way he said that last word, low, warm, and intimate, sent a flush rising to Emma's cheeks. From the side, she caught Catherine and Marcus exchanging a glance. "Well," Catherine said brightly, "let's get you two settled. I've put you in the blue room. It's the most romantic view in the house." As they followed her through the grand hallways, Emma tried not to gape at the priceless artwork, the ornate furniture, the effortless display of generational wealth. This was Dan's world, she reminded herself. For him, this was normal. The blue room was breathtaking, a corner suite with French doors opening to a private balcony that looked out over the ocean. The bed was enormous, layered in silks that probably cost more than Emma made in a year. "I hope you'll be comfortable," Catherine said, her gaze sharp as she watched Emma's reaction. "Daniel's always loved this room. So many childhood memories." When they were finally alone, an awkward silence settled between them. The weight of what they were doing, sharing this room, pretending for 3 whole days, suddenly hit hard. And just like that, all the rehearsed touches and kisses in the world didn't seem like enough. "I can just take the couch," Dan offered softly, nodding toward the sitting area near the windows. Emma gave a small laugh, trying to sound relaxed and mature. "That couch is smaller than you. Don't be silly. We're both adults. It's just sleep. Right? She trailed off, but the way Dan was watching her made it clear that sleep might be the last thing either of them managed. Before the moment got any more complicated, a knock broke the tension. Patricia Hayes appeared at the door, arms full with Emma's weekend luggage and a stack of garment bags. "Your afternoon wardrobe, Miss Parker," Patricia said crisply. "Mrs. Sterling has arranged a tennis match followed by drinks on the terrace. Mr. Sterling's tennis whites are already hanging in the closet." Once Patricia had gone, Emma unzipped the first garment bag and found a designer tennis dress that probably cost more than her first car. Every piece Patricia had selected was flawless, sophisticated, luxurious, and exactly what Daniel Sterling's fiancé was expected to wear. "I should go get changed," Emma murmured, grabbing the outfit and heading for the bathroom. "Emma." Dan's voice stopped her. She turned. "You don't need to be nervous," he said, his tone warm and sincere. "You look incredible in anything." The simplicity of the compliment tightened something in her chest. "Dan," she started, but he stepped closer, brushing her cheek with his fingertips. "You're going to do great this weekend. Just be you." "What if me isn't enough?" she whispered. Dan smiled gently. "Then they don't deserve you." 20 minutes later, Emma found herself on the tennis court, racket in hand, facing Amanda Sterling. What was supposed to be a friendly match felt more like a public trial. Dan and Marcus stood on the opposite side of the net as doubles partners, while Catherine lounged in the shade, keeping score and offering smug commentary. "Such a perfect day for tennis," Amanda said sweetly while warming up. "Daniel tells me you're rather new to the game." "Very new," Emma admitted, whiffing her first serve entirely. Amanda's smile sharpened. "Don't worry, we'll take it easy, won't we, Marcus?" Marcus responded with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Naturally, we wouldn't want to embarrass family." He said the word as if Emma was anything but. The first set was a disaster. Emma had barely played before, and it showed. Amanda and Marcus moved effortlessly across the court, landing shots just out of her reach. Dan tried to cover for her, but even his talent couldn't mask her inexperience. "Don't worry, darling," Catherine called out sweetly after another missed return. "Not everyone's born athletic. I'm sure you shine in other ways." Emma clenched her jaw, ignoring the sugary poison in Catherine's voice. This wasn't tennis. It was psychological warfare, and she was the target. During a break, Dan leaned close. "Don't let them get to you," he said quietly. "It's working," Emma muttered. "I'm making you look bad." "You could never do that?" He took her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "Besides, I have an idea. Trust me." Emma nodded cautiously. Dan's lips curled into a wicked smile. "Marcus," he called, stepping back onto the court. "Let's make this next set interesting. A little wager." Marcus's eyes lit up. "What are you thinking?" "If Emma and I win, you donate $50,000 to a charity of her choice. If you and Amanda win," Dan paused, "I'll give $100,000 to yours." Emma's head snapped toward him in shock. 2-to-1 odds. He was practically guaranteeing a loss, just to make her feel better. "Dan, that's—" "Deal," Marcus interrupted, grinning triumphantly. "This should be fun." What followed was a masterclass in subtle manipulation. Dan didn't magically become better. In fact, he started missing easy shots, sending balls into the net, and setting Emma up for opportunities to shine. He cheered for her loudly, with real excitement, every time she hit the ball, especially when she actually scored. "That's my girl," he shouted after she nailed a shot down the line. "Did you see that? Perfect!" His joy was contagious. Emma found herself relaxing into the game, even laughing when she missed a shot instead of letting it frustrate her. And strangely, that shift changed everything. Her game actually started to improve. Not perfect, but definitely better. "Let's go, Emma," Dan shouted from the sideline as she prepared for match point. "Show them what you've got." She inhaled deeply, tossed the ball skyward, and landed her very first ace of the day. The ball zipped past Amanda before she could react. The silence that followed was thick and stunned. "Well," Catherine said after a beat, her tone rigid, "that was unexpected." Marcus looked like he'd bitten into something bitter. "Fluke. Just pure luck." Dan leapt over the net and pulled Emma into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed, breathless. "That was all skill," he said proudly. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet my fiancé, full of surprises." As he set her down, his hands lingered at her waist, his gaze full of pride, warmth, and something that made Emma's heart skip. "I can't believe we actually won," she murmured. "I can," Dan said softly. "You're amazing, Emma Parker. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." The air between them practically vibrated with tension, until Catherine's voice sliced through it. "How sweet. So competitive. Shall we head in for cocktails? I'm simply dying to learn more about Emma's background." As the group walked back toward the house, Amanda drifted beside Emma and spoke in a low, honeyed tone. "Quite the performance," she said. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, I think you do," Amanda replied, her smile sugar-sweet and laced with poison. "The real question is, who's the act for, us or him?" Before Emma could respond, Amanda was already gone, leaving behind a chill that had nothing to do with the sea breeze. Cocktails on the terrace were a minefield of passive-aggressive remarks and pointed questions. Catherine interrogated Emma about her fictitious upbringing like a seasoned attorney, while Marcus tossed out jabs about gold diggers and opportunistic women who married rich. "It's just so rare to meet someone so unrefined," Amanda said with a laugh as sharp as shattered glass. "Most women in our circle are so fake, don't you agree, Catherine?" "Oh, absolutely," Catherine replied, pausing deliberately. "There's a certain charm in authenticity." Emma's patience was starting to wear thin. These people were experts at cloaking cruelty and civility, and she was done being their dartboard. "I think authenticity is vastly underrated," she said calmly. "It's easy to hide behind wealth and titles and forget who you are underneath it all." A frosty silence settled over the group. "How profound," Marcus said with a thin smile. "And what would you say you are underneath it all, Emma?" Emma felt Dan stiffen next to her, but she didn't need him to shield her. "Someone who knows the difference between having money and having value," she replied, smiling as sweetly as Amanda had earlier. Catherine audibly gasped. Marcus's face flushed crimson. Dan, meanwhile, looked like he was seconds away from bursting out laughing. "Well then," Catherine said icily, "perhaps it's time to get dressed for dinner." Back in their room, Dan was shaking with silent laughter. "Did you see Marcus's face?" he whispered, shutting the door behind them. "I thought he was going to explode." "I probably shouldn't have said that," Emma admitted, though she was grinning too. "Your mom looked ready to have me deported." "It was perfect, every word," Dan said, lifting his hands to gently cup her face. His thumbs brushed along her cheeks, and the way he looked at her, like she'd just lit up his entire world, made her breath catch. They stood close, closer than necessary. The air was electric. "Dan?" she whispered, not even sure what she was asking for. "I know," he said, voice low. "I feel it too." For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. Not for show, not for the fake engagement, but because they both wanted it. And the desire in his eyes matched the one blooming in her chest. Then, suddenly, he stepped back, raking a hand through his hair. "We should get ready. I'm sure my mother has some delightfully torturous dinner planned." Emma nodded, masking the wave of disappointment washing over her. Right. Dinner. But as she stepped into the bathroom to change, she couldn't shake the sense that something had shifted. Something real. The line between pretend and truth was growing blurrier by the day, and Emma was beginning to realize that her heart no longer cared where the performance ended. As expected, dinner was a carefully designed ambush. Catherine had invited several family friends, old money elites, who scrutinized Emma like a strange insect they couldn't quite classify. The conversation meandered from fine art to international politics to the latest scandals in high society, each topic a reminder that Emma didn't belong. "So, Emma dear," said one of the guests, a silver-haired woman with a glass of wine in hand. "What do your parents do? Daniel wasn't very clear about your family." Emma felt Dan's hand slip into hers beneath the table, giving it a gentle squeeze. "My mother passed away a few years ago," she said softly. "She was a nurse. My father, he wasn't really around much." "Oh, how tragic," the woman said, her sympathy laced with condescension. "And no other family?" Emma drew in a breath, recalling the backstory she'd created. "Actually, after my mother passed, I was raised by her best friend, Sarah Patterson. She and her family welcomed me like I was their own." "Patterson?" Catherine repeated, tapping her chin. "I don't believe we know any Pattersons in our circle." "They're from Boston," Emma explained gently. "Sarah's married to a high school English teacher. They're down-to-earth, lovely people." Marcus leaned in, curiosity piqued. "A teacher? How charming." "And they'll be attending the engagement party," Dan added smoothly. "I'm actually looking forward to seeing Sarah again. It's been years." Emma gave Dan a quick, thankful glance, but she caught the calculating glint in Marcus's eyes. He was plotting something, and her gut told her it wouldn't be kind. After dinner, everyone gathered in the library for drinks and what Catherine called intimate conversation. While the men drifted into a business discussion, Emma found herself cornered by Amanda. "You know," Amanda said with casual venom, "what you mentioned earlier about knowing the difference between being rich and being worthless, have you really figured it out?" Her smile was razor sharp. "Funny how people reveal their true selves when they're angry. That little comment of yours, it sounded like you think we're beneath you, which is strange, considering how desperate you are to join our ranks." Emma's cheeks flushed. "That's not what isn't it?" Amanda interrupted, voice dropping to a whisper as she leaned in closer. "Tell me, Emma, what's your real goal here? Marrying Daniel will make you wealthy, sure, but it won't make you one of us. We'll always know you don't belong." Emma squared her shoulders. "Maybe I don't want to belong to a group that believes money equals superiority." Amanda's laugh was cold and cruel. "Oh, sweetheart, if that were true, you wouldn't be standing here wearing a $50,000 ring and parading around in designer couture." She leaned in so close her breath touched Emma's ear. "We both know what you really are. The only question is, does Daniel?" Before Emma could reply, Amanda glided away like nothing had happened, leaving Emma stunned. The worst part? Amanda wasn't entirely wrong. Emma was playing a part, dressed in borrowed luxury, acting like someone she wasn't. But who was the act really for? The people around her, or herself? "Emma?" Dan's voice pulled her from her spiraling thoughts. "You okay? You look a little pale." "I'm fine," she lied. "Just tired. It's been a long day." Dan studied her face, clearly unconvinced, but let it go. "Want to get some fresh air? The beach is incredible at night." She nodded quickly, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the house. They slipped out through the French doors and strolled toward the private shoreline, the rhythmic waves slowly soothing her. "Talk to me," Dan said softly as they walked along the surf. "What did Amanda say to you?" "Nothing I haven't already thought myself," Emma admitted. "She just confirmed a few things." Dan stopped walking and turned to face her. "Like what?" Emma gazed out at the moonlit ocean, trying to summon the courage. "That I don't belong in this world. I'm pretending. The clothes, the parties, it's all a costume. Underneath, I'm still just a broke journalist from Brooklyn who never met her father and watched her mom die alone." "Emma, no, let me finish." She faced him now, her eyes pleading for him to understand. "Amanda called me a gold digger, and maybe she's right. Maybe I am just here for the money, pretending to be someone I'm not, because that's easier than admitting I'm nobody." Dan didn't respond right away. His jaw clenched, his silence heavy. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but steady. "Do you want to know what I see when I look at you?" Emma gave a small nod, unable to speak. "I see a woman who walked into one of Manhattan's most elite events with nothing but nerve and fire in her eyes, who stood up to my mother, Marcus, and Amanda without breaking. You challenged me to be more than I was. You made me laugh at a tennis match, and you care enough about 20,000 people to fake a marriage for their sake." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Dan, I'm not done," he said firmly. Dan gently wiped away the tears slipping down Emma's cheeks with his thumbs. "You want the truth?" he said, voice low and raw. "You're the most real person I've ever met. You're not hiding behind wealth or a famous last name. You're just you. And that's extraordinary." The sincerity in his voice and the way he looked at her, as if she were something rare and precious, cracked something deep inside her. Before she realized what she was doing, her hand reached up to touch his face, fingers trailing the sharp line of his jaw. "You don't really know me," she whispered, afraid to believe any of it. "I know enough," Dan replied, his voice strained. "Enough to know you make me want to be the man you think I am." His words hovered between them, fragile and electric, an invisible bridge neither was sure they should cross. Emma felt the moment teetering on the edge of something that could never be undone. "Dan," she breathed. She didn't know if it was a warning or a plea. "I know this is messy," he said, softer now. "I know we told ourselves this was just business, a convenient arrangement. But Emma, what I feel for you isn't fake anymore. It hasn't been for a long time." Her heart skipped. "What are you saying?" she asked, barely able to speak. "I'm saying I'm falling for you, fast, hard, completely against every rule I've ever had." He let out a crooked, self-conscious smile. "Somewhere between that tennis match and watching you hold your own against my family's mind games, I stopped pretending to love you and just started loving you." His confession hit her like a wave. He loved her. Daniel Sterling, the man who could have anyone, who belonged in a world far above hers, loved her. "I love you too," she whispered. The words ripped from someplace deep inside her. I tried to fight it, tried to remind myself this was all pretend. "But Dan, I love you so much it terrifies me." He smiled, wide and blinding. Yeah. Emma laughed through her tears. "God help me, but yeah." And then he kissed her. It wasn't like the kisses they'd rehearsed or the public displays they'd perfected. It was real, urgent, desperate. It was months of longing breaking loose all at once. Emma melted into him, arms wrapping around his neck as she kissed him back with everything she had. He tasted like whiskey and hope, like home and wildness all at once. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. So, Dan murmured, his forehead resting gently against hers. Where does this leave us? Emma let out a shaky laugh. I have no idea. This definitely wasn't part of the plan. The best things never are, he said, smiling gently. Emma, I want this to be real. Not just for now. Forever real. Her heart soared, then plummeted. As much as I want that, she said quietly, your family will never accept me. Then they'll just have to learn how to be disappointed, Dan said without hesitation. I don't care what my mother thinks, or what Marcus plots, or what the tabloids say. I care about you, about us. And when they find out everything, that this engagement started as a lie? Dan paused, then nodded. Then we tell them the truth, that it began as business, but became something real. Because sometimes the best love stories start with the most unlikely beginnings. Emma wanted to believe him, standing there on the beach with the moonlight casting silver ripples across the water, and Dan's arms wrapped tightly around her. It felt, just for a moment, like happy endings might actually be real. But the reality loomed. What about the inheritance? The company? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We'll figure it out, Dan said with unwavering calm. His eyes never left hers. Emma, I built an empire from the ground up once. If I have to do it again, from scratch, just to be with you, then that's what I'll do. His words hit her like a tidal wave. He was willing to give up everything, his legacy, his company, even his family's approval, just to choose her. Dan, I can't let you do that, she said, shaking her head overwhelmed. You're not letting me do anything, he said gently, cupping her face between his hands. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Emma Parker, you are worth more than all of it combined. You're worth everything. That was it. The dam broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Years of feeling not good enough, years of loneliness, of being overlooked and underestimated, all of it washed away in the face of his unwavering certainty. I love you, she sobbed into his chest. I love you so much. I don't know what to do with it. Dan held her tighter, his voice a soft whisper in her ear. You don't have to do anything with it. Just let me love you back. Let me prove to you every day that you're worth every single thing I could ever give up. They stood there, wrapped in each other, as the waves crashed around their feet and the stars shimmered above them. And for the first time in her life, Emma felt whole. She wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't fighting the world by herself. She had Dan, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Hand in hand, they walked back toward the house. But as they neared the front steps, Emma's gaze lifted and caught sight of a figure in the upstairs window, Marcus Sterling. He stood in shadow, backlit by the soft glow of a lamp, watching. Emma stopped cold. He saw us, she whispered. Dan followed her gaze and his jaw clenched, but his hand never left hers. Let him look, he said firmly. Let all of them look. I'm done hiding how I feel about you. But as they stepped inside and climbed the stairs to their room, Emma couldn't shake the chill in her spine. Marcus hadn't just seen two people in love. He had seen something else, an opening. And knowing Marcus Sterling, that couldn't mean anything good. Still, when they reached their room and Dan's arms wrapped around her again, when he whispered promises into her hair and kissed the tears from her cheeks, Emma let herself forget just for tonight. Forget Marcus, forget the company, forget the risks. Tonight, she was just a woman who had finally been chosen, fully, freely, fearlessly. Tomorrow, they'd face whatever Marcus was planning. Tomorrow, they'd figure out how to turn their fake engagement into something real without losing everything. But tonight they were Emma and Dan. Two people who had found each other against all odds and decided that love was worth fighting for. And as Emma fell asleep in the safety of his arms, she dared to believe, truly believe, that maybe, just maybe, she could have her happily ever after. The real question was, would the world let her keep it